Welcome everyone to today's episode of Goals and Game Changers. We're here to explore key insights on business transformation, leadership, and product innovation. My name is Stacey Louie and I am the CEO of Hyperdrive and your host for today. Now we have Dr. Steve Martin. He's a highly respected expert in business transformation. In fact, he's spent the last 30 years on helping organizations from the Fortune 100 to startups go through meaningful change. Today, he's going to share his secrets to navigating complex challenges and how he's helped drive this change within organizations to help create high-performing teams and great products. It's also going to be a time where we talk about moving from reactive decision-making to making more intentional transformation decisions. So with that, let's get started. I'd like to hand it over to Steve. Steve, why don't you introduce yourself and give us a little background?
Well, thank you so much for having me here, Stacey. Pleasure to be here today to talk about goals and game changers. So a little bit about myself. I started off in that whole guest experience realm. I was a trainer way back at the Haunted Mansion back in the day, and it really taught me a lot of lessons. We're going to talk a little bit about that and also talk about it. Selfish plug in my book here. And it really started to open up my eyes about, what leadership, what management is, and how to help people have that really wonderful experience. Transitioned into my entire arc of, being an engineer, turned out to be a really bad engineer. But what I was really good at was talking with people, understanding strategy, problems, challenges, transformation, getting from point A to point B. I was really good at that. And so I spent the last 30 years, my gosh, 30 years of my career helping organizations kind of figure out what is that thing that they want to go to, why now, and setting out that plan, how to get from point A to point whatever that point is in the future. And I've really had a chance to run the gamut from, the Fortune 10 and a lot of other Fortune 500 companies, all the way to what I'm going to call public institutions, like a little bit with the federal, state, and some county governments, nonprofits as well, companies that are starting up to, tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of employees. So I've seen a lot. And what I like to say here is there's some things that have worked, and yay, we've got some things that worked, and some what I'm going to call bless your heart. Oh, bless your heart moments. You thought that would work. You thought that was a good idea. No, it was terrible. And so a lot of lessons learned from those bless your heart moments. But my whole drive is to really help organizations take it to that next level. I'm here for you. That's my whole mantra.
That's great. And your background as an expert in business transformation, combined with your expertise in developing new products, and building organizations that center on customers, you've got to have incredible stories about how organizations take their transformation toward that goal of getting better products and having that customer focus. Tell us a little bit about how that looks to you. Like, how do you step into an organization and help them through that path?
Yeah, so most organizations call us with a problem. Hey, we are having a problem in this area. It's very rarely that I think you, Stacy, and we get the conversation, everything is fine. And so they usually call us, they have a problem. It's usually our customers are leaving. We're losing market share. Our quality is declining. We're losing our top talent. There's some sort of problem that's going in there. And with the best of intentions, it's those mid-level to management to those really executive leaders that call us in, hey, I want you to do this for us. And so they have a preconceived notion of what that solution is. And I think what we bring to the table is that fantastic, wonderful. Let's talk about that and understand how they got to that as their conclusion at this is the solution that they want to go to. And what we find typically is that's really probably not the best solution. It's what they know. And I think what we bring to the table, especially from a transformation, since we've done it so many different times in so many different ways in so many different industries, what we can do is we can tap into that vast knowledge and figure out, okay, this has worked here, this has worked here, this has worked here. Let's see if there's a combination of these various things that might work for this particular situation, as opposed to this is the preconceived notion of this is the path I want you to take for us. And so many of the very first conversations that we have when it comes to transformation is why? Why now? What's the pain point? What is the pain point for right now? And if you take a look at any of like the change management theories or anything out there, whether it's Cotter or ProSci or McKinsey, any of those big models that you see out there, it always starts with those two questions: why and why now? And if we can't answer those two questions, quite frankly, I don't want to go to that solution just quite yet, because we can actually make the situation a little bit worse.
Right, right. And a lot of times organizations don't really want to spend the time thinking about why. They just think that they know it. And even more challenging is executives, not only do they think they know it, they think everybody around them already agrees about why. And so they step into the scenario of let's just start moving things. They have a bias towards action is what they say, right? We're just gonna start working on stuff, but not necessarily understanding what they're working toward, and it creates complications, right?
Yes, and I think the bias towards action is that they think that moving the needle, doing tasks, doing action items, that is action. Well, that is absolutely true. That is action. And what we just like to ask is, okay, let's invest maybe 1 hour. It's not a lot of time. It's just like, let's just stop and pause, just breathe. It's fine. It's 1 hour isn't going to kill us. Let's just ask a couple of these two questions here. And here's the key thing. And going back to your point here is your executives think that everybody already knows what this is, but that's not the case. And what we find is that that common understanding is not so common. And so what we want to do is we want to get a group of people together that are impacted by that problem. Oh, I feel the pain in this area. Oh, I feel the pain in this area. And really pulling together a small group of people. It doesn't have to be the whole company. 3 to 7 people is perfectly fine. And you just get them in that room together for that 1 hour. What do we think the problem is?
Mm.
What's our evidence? I don't want to just say, well, I feel this way. Well, this is what I'm seeing. Okay, that's fabulous. Wonderful. Show me the data.
Mm.
Why do you think the quality is going down? Why do you think your staff or your customers might be dissatisfied? Why do you feel like you're not, quote, releasing enough product or doing enough innovation? What's your data? And then if we have that conversation, it's just like, oh, here, wait a second. It might be my perception that's driving my reality. And I think we both know that perception, whether or not it's based in fact, those are the things that really drive what those actions are. And so if we can just take that beat, that pause, step back for that second and just kind of say, this is the problem. This is the area. This is why we think it is that area. And then we can have that next conversation. Well, okay, if that's the impact, why is that a problem now?
Mm.
And so I think those are the crucial conversations to have before you start taking some of that action.
Right, right. And it reminds me of a client that we once had, and they're in the healthcare sector. And this client, um, they started to build a new product. So the executive said, "Hey, we're not launching enough products. We just have to launch this new product." So they started building this product, and it was a healthcare policy, if you will, like how do you service a certain part of their clientele. And as they built this, they said, "Hey, we just can't just build this product by itself. We've got to launch it across North America, so specifically the United States." So they had to get compliance across all 50 states as well as the provinces, all the regional areas. So if you can imagine how much time and investment they had in this, and to build this product is relatively small, they spent well over $40 million just on the initial investment. And then they decided to launch it, of course, right? You've spent $40 million, you've got to launch something. So they launch it only to find out that after the first 6 months, not one policy had been sold. And then they started putting more money behind it and they got a handful of policies. So about a year after, they have no more than 50 policies created for this $40 million investment. That's almost like $10 million a policy, or I don't know, 1 million, however the math works out. But you look at this, and they had 50 clients on a $40 million investment. Um, Not only did they have to shut down the project, they had to continue the policies and support them because they just couldn't cancel everything. They just didn't sell it anymore. So as far as I to this day, they're still supporting that policy. Now, the key question is, to your point, Dr. Steve, they didn't ask the basic question of why are they doing what they're doing? And
Yes.
had they known, they would have been a little bit more mindful before they just start acting to create new products. And
Yes.
turns out creating new products wasn't the problem.
Yes. And so just having a new product out there, like you said, is not going to necessarily solve the problem. It's having that conversation with the customers. What is it that they need? What is their pain point? And this doesn't have to be software. It could be a service that you're providing. It could be a physical product. It could be a combination thereof. Truly understanding what drives the customers and what it is that they're thinking, because they're going to vote with their feet if they like your product, if you are solving a problem for them and you're making that problem easy for them to solve. And so it's not a complicated product that is out there. That's when you have a customer. That's when you've got something really special. And that reminds me of one of my favorite transformations that I know that we're going to talk a little bit more about today was with this one organization. I'll just broadly say that it's in the finance industry. They had one customer using their product that constituted 9 figures of annual income. All right,
Nine.
9 figures, all right, of annual income from one customer. And this one customer was just really upset. And they were approaching other organizations, other products for them to transition from this one company to something other than. And when we had that discovery call, if you will, me as a consultant being brought in and being, third party, you can tell me anything. What is it that you're thinking? What is it that you're feeling? And they were just basically not feeling listened to. And they liked the core product, but they really needed 5 things in that core product for them to really use it and for them to use it well. I'm like, that's it, is what I'm thinking to myself. So if we can solve the problem with these 5 things we just need to add to this particular product, we can actually save 9 figures worth of annual income. And that's what we did, is that we really went down into looking at, okay, what is it going to take to do these 5 things? Now, these 5 things they were not small. They were going to take us about a year for us to actually get all 5 things done. And this company was not going to wait for a year for these things to be done.
Hmm.
And so it's just understanding, okay, what are some bits and pieces? What are some increments? Sometimes we like to use that word increment. What are the smallest thing that we can put in play to show some goodwill, some trust,
Hmm.
and to show some understanding that we really do, as the provider to you, we understand your pain and we really want to solve this with you. And so working through that first couple months together to actually their top 3 things, getting just a little bit of a chunk, a little bit of a chunk, a little bit of a chunk for those top 3 things, it was enough to kind of keep them in the loop and working with us. And so having some of those initial steps to show good faith and trust
Mhm.
and to deliver something to solve their problem, not at the end of a year, but within a couple months, was just absolutely essential.
So what I'm hearing from you is when working with some of these clients, you want to be able to identify these kind of short-term goals, something that is tangible. I'm also hearing that once you hit some of those goals or you start building that momentum, momentum's going to keep carrying you.
Yes, absolutely. And again, you look at any of the change management frameworks that are out there, those short-term wins, when
Mhm.
you actually involve the people who are impacted with what it is that you're doing. So the direct involvement, you get that what they call intrinsic buy-in. We're not doing it for you. We're working on this together.
Mhm.
And we're going to make adjustments and we're going to iterate even within those little chunks along the way so that we get you the solution that you want and the solution that you need in order to do your job, in order to solve that particular problem. And so that involvement in combination with actually releasing something that solves not the full problem, but just enough of the problem to say, yeah, you know what? I'm willing to continue on this journey with you.
Mhm. Mhm. No, that's good. That's super helpful. I'm starting to think about as organizations are shifting to this new product model. So we're hearing in the industry, and we're actually seeing this where organizations are saying, "Hey, let's stop creating projects. Like they're kind of done with having these projects. Instead, they're looking at the work as manufacturing internal products and even services as a product and the things that they create, things internal people create. So, for example, I've got one client who's implementing Salesforce, and the way they see the world is Salesforce as an internal IT platform is a product. And I've got another client who's looking at the world saying, "Gosh, we have they're in a very technical area. They're creating um, iron out of iron ore, and certain parts of their process, they're creating products. So the product is actually a real thing. They're creating iron. A services organization, so for hospitality, and their hospitality group who maintains the rooms, the the people who actually go in to take care of the rooms, their product is a clean room. They have cleanliness, something that it's almost like creating home. Creating home is their product, a home away from home. And so
Mhm.
that's the mindset that they have. Um, for organizations who haven't crossed that bridge, who aren't thinking in those terms, and still are on this project minded side, like what advice can you give to those companies, and maybe some thoughts on why it's important to go to that centricity, that product minded approach?
Yeah, and I take a look back at some of the major, how should I say, project management influential bodies that are out there. And
Mm,
if you look at the core of why project management, why agile got started in the first place, you look back in the history of both of these is they had problems that we were trying to solve.
mm,
And if you look at even like from the Project Management Institute, PMI, they start talking about a product approach where we're trying to deliver value for folks, and projects should deliver value for folks. And it's the same type of thinking when it comes to agile and agile approaches. I don't care which agile approach you want. We want to make sure that we've got a product that our customers value. And so, from either one of these approaches, the core of why we have them in the first place is that we're trying to create something that, quite frankly, our customers want to buy. And so, for those organizations that are having difficulty making that transition, I start looking at, quite frankly, some of the financials. Let's go back to the example that you just had at the beginning of this conversation today. $40 million for 50 policies. Now, this is where I start getting into, I lived in the South for a little bit and I can start tipping down my glasses a little bit. Now, was that worth it? All right. And then, starting to have that conversation with it. Is this an investment that you would make again today? All right. So let's do talk about some of that ROI. So for some of the folks that are having a hard time understanding the transition from project over to product, I do have some of the classic conversations. Let's talk about some of your metrics. Are your customers happy? Are you making a return? All right. So what if we take a look at it this way? What do you think the customers really want from you? And then I love this technique. It's one of them that I talk about in the book, plug. It's that being comfortable with uncomfortable silence. I'm really good with uncomfortable silence. I can ask that question. What it is, what do you think your customer wants? Why do you think your customers are staying with you? Oh, because we're the best. Okay, that's okay. That's like saying, like a parent saying, because I'm your father, I'm your mother, I'm your parent. Like, no, no, okay, no, not good enough. Try again. All right. And then being quiet and letting that really sink in. Why is it that this company is here? So we make the transition from the hard metrics, the hard things that they're used to, and then we start to introduce those questions. Why do you think it is? Why do you think it is? Why do you think it is? And you might know that that's kind of like the five whys approach, getting down there with those five whys. Well, why is that? Well, why is that? Why is that? And because each one of those why questions, that uncomfortable silence gets a little bit longer, a little bit longer, a little bit longer.
We love to hear real stories about organizations. You've given some great examples. Can you think of another example of another business transformation that you've experienced and you've been a part of, where the organization is trying to make a change? So there's a transformation of some sort, trying to make a change. Can you share with us uh, what was the underlying need for change, and then what did you specifically do about it? Like, what tools did you find incredibly valuable to bring into that into transformation?
Yeah, so there was another organizations that I was working with. I can't say too much about it because if I even say the industry, and the size of that particular organization, there's not a lot of competition in that particular industry. So I'm just going to leave this pretty vague, But again, we are well into, in this case here, the 10 to 11 digits. I mean, this is a pretty big organization. And what they found is that the product that they had created, it was just naturally reaching the end of its life cycle, both in it was no longer the new thing on the block. It was no longer seen as the revolutionary technical advantage, it was no longer seen as, oh, this is the gem. And so this was a company that had been around for long enough that they're like, "Ooh, here, wait a second. We are now no longer considered the new kid on the block. We're actually legacy." Ooh, ooh. And then for that organization, using that legacy term was just like, ooh, it was like I just called their baby ugly. And
Mm.
so I'm just like, but that was the reality of the situation is that, yeah, they were legacy and their competition was just taking their market share left and right. I mean, they went from well past more than half double digits market share. And they were coming down to around a third of the market share. So they were losing a lot. And so what we did in this case here is we need to take a look at your product because your product in and of itself is no longer resonating with your
Mm.
clients. And so what we had to do here is we had to work with the entire organization. And so when the executive called us in, I need you to get with my product group to make my product teams create something innovative. Just like, okay, that's fantastic. That's wonderful. You do realize to get a quote innovative product out there, it's going to take more than your product organization.
Right.
It's going to take marketing. It's going to take your customer success group. It's going to take all your different parts of the organization to pull the product together. It's going to take your finance organization because how you're doing finance today in a project-based environment, how you do financing today isn't working.
Mhm.
And then we also have to work with the product development teams. And no longer is it going to be, this group only doing this group only doing this group only doing this, and a lot of silos and a lot of things throwing off. But we have to look at this from a product perspective.
Mhm.
And so what we did with this particular group, of course, we're not going to transform the entire company. That's just ridiculous. I mean, again, 10 and 11 figures, we're not going to do that right away. But what we can do, and what we did do in this case here, is we found one customer segment. And so it was a global customer segment, but it was one customer segment that we worked with. And I had four teams, four product development teams, working with around 15 or so managers. And they had managers representing, like two for customer service, two for marketing, two for, pulling the product together, two for release, two for, and all that other stuff, working kind of at this level. And then I had three executives. And so we just took a nice vertical slice and we redesigned the product.
Help us at like a thin slice. Why would you ever want to take a thin slice versus like trying to do it all? Like what's the advantage of taking a slice of the organization?
Oh, absolutely. What I love about doing a thin slice of like a customer segment,
Hmm.
or sometimes a thin slice might be a geographic location. A thin slice might be just this one part of your entire product portfolio.
Hmm.
What we're going to try to do here is that with a transformation, and I don't like to say this lightly or condescending, is that when you transform things, you actually have to change from your status quo.
Mm.
And you're never going to quite know how that change is going to react. And so instead of trying to do everything all at once in one big bang, which takes more people, time, money, effort, it's a lot of risk. What
Mm.
we can do is we can take just one of those chunks and we can experiment with our best guess. This is what we think it's going to look like when we put all this stuff together with these teams and these managers and this executive and this nice vertical slice here. And we experiment and we say, what is working with this and what is not working with this? And once we fine tune that for that vertical slice, then we can just add a little bit more for another customer segment, another geographic region, and see what it looks like there. And so instead of building up a cake layer by layer, we're actually going to build a cake slice by slice. And I found by doing it that way, it tends to be more successful.
Okay, yeah. So it sounds like a pilot program. You run a pilot just on a certain segment of what you're really trying to accomplish, and through that, you can kind of test all the teams and the systems and how they make decisions in the organization. Kind of get that fleshed out just
Yep.
through that one pilot.
Absolutely. One of the tools I love to use, especially for a brand new product and transitioning to a product development mindset, I love a user journey map. I love
Yeah.
journey mapping. I think it's one of those things, again, one of those tools that helps you really walk in the shoes of your customer. How is your customer going to use your product, your service?
Mm.
From the minute they get it in their hands to whenever that thing is done. Oh, I'm going to do this with it first. Really? What is that? Because we would have done it a different way. Oh no, we're going to do this first and this second and this third. Oh, we would have done it like two, three, then one. And we just really understand again, the idea to get a really loyal customer, a really good customer that's going to be your spokesperson for you, that's going to sell your product, your service for you, is if you make it easy to solve their problem. And when you walk in the shoes of that person, step one is this, step two is this, step three is this, and so forth, until that task or that product has its value. That's when you've got a really good product, when you understand that. And then when you've got that, step one, two, three, it just makes everything else after that flow so much easier. How you create your roadmap, how you set up your teams, how you set up your management that's going to interact with those teams, your communications you need to have with your executives to work with their customers, how you're going to work with your marketing team, how you're going to fund stuff. And all those things then roll down into the very specific tasks. Sometimes we call that a product backlog, whatever that list of tasks or requirements, whatever it is that you want to go from.
That's great. All of that from a customer journey map. That's fantastic.
Right. Yeah. So that's, again, one of my favorite high impact things you can do. Yes, it is action. Remember how you were saying at the top of this whole entire session here together, executives want to drive to action. That is an action thing you can do.
That's fantastic. Any other tools or techniques that you'd recommend?
So I think, again, the big thing is starting off with some of those answers to those big, hairy, and you can fill in the blank with whatever descriptions you want to put in there. I've heard pretty much them all. Having that vision, having that beacon, having that direction. Why now? What's the impact? Really, again, figuring out who are the people, especially your top 3 to 7 folks that can really help you move this transformation forward. Again, the goal is not transformation. The goal is solving a problem. The transformation is just the vehicle. And I think people forget that, yes, you're investing in a transformation, but why are you doing a transformation? Because again, you're solving a problem. So again, I think my biggest tools, tips, techniques start there first. And then the product backlogs, what you're going to do for your tasks on your teams, those are just going to naturally fall out afterwards.
Fantastic. Now, thank you. We're running out of time, but I want to acknowledge you've just written a book, Bad Stuff Manager 2. And replace the S with whatever you want.
Whatever
But
word works for you. Yes.
really bad stuff. Could you share with us a little bit about your book and what inspired it?
Yeah. And I find that whenever I work in transformations, again, with the best of intentions, you've got a management and executive team that they know what they know. And when you start working in these product-driven organizations where it takes cross silos, cross team working, working with your customers, working up, working down, working to the side. Many of these folks are just not prepared. And what I'm finding in not only the research, hence Doc Steve Martin, in the research that we've been doing, is that there's a huge shift right now in terms of folks leaving, quote, that middle management. So the directors, AVPs, VPs, kind of in that middle management layer. We now have folks from Gen Z and the millennials entering in there, and they're just not ready. And I'm seeing a lot of the mistakes that they're making right now is a lot of the mistakes I made when I was a very first time, director, VP, and things like that. So the bad that managers do is actually my story of all the stupid that I did. I just didn't know. I like to say I should have answered the clue phone because it was ringing. It was ringing pretty hard. I did everything wrong as a first-time manager. And even for my first couple of years being into management, I just didn't realize I was doing some of these anti-patterns. I
Mhm.
thought they were good until they weren't. So I went over that bell curve. And so this is a stories of patterns, practices, things that are just unfortunately common traps that folks that are struggling in management fall into. And what I try to do in this book is offer some really tangible, practical tips for you to overcome whatever that particular challenge is, whether it's with communication, conflict, um, setting goals, and all those types of things.
That's great. Yeah, and with things like the pandemic, all the way through the changes that we've had in the economy in the last 20 years, the ability for senior managers to be real mentors to their people, to raise them into real mature managers of their own, there's just been a gap.
Yeah.
And it sounds like you're addressing that gap and sharing those tough lessons that you've learned, Dr. Steve. So at Goals and Game Changers, we try to focus on our practices, but we also want to look at people. And They're great examples. I'm sure you have one, Dr. Steve, about maybe a player of the week. So in our case, what player of the week could you identify as a group or someone who's just made a great impact based off of what you've learned?
Yeah, and I kind of want to go back into the archives. And so it's maybe not a player of the week. I'm going to call this person an MVP. And so it was one of my very first consulting gigs that I was tasked to do a rescue of a particular product that was being developed. And this person put a lot of trust in me. But this person had to go travel internationally for 6 weeks. So this person let me loose for 6 weeks to, come up with my plans, do all my interviews, come up with what is the approach that we're going to use for this particular transformation. And when this person comes back and we were getting ready to do kind of like the executive presentation, but this person didn't come back with just themselves. They brought the entire board of directors. So I had the entire board of directors there with really notable, internationally recognized companies. That is the C something of this company. That's the C level of this company. And it was like 8 of them and this one person who hired me. And pretty young in my consulting career. So this was a good 20 or so years ago. And they said, all right, let's see what you came up with. And on this board of directors, I laid out my entire plan. I spoke for nearly 35 minutes straight without even taking a breath. Look at everything that's here. It's so detailed and da 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 da. I was so excited for it. And then at the end of that 35 minutes or so, I could see this person was starting to fidget in their chair. And I'm like, okay, there's my sign. I need to wrap it up here. And I'm like, all right, so what do you think? And this is the second time in my career I've heard, bless your heart. So this person just calmly takes a deep breath in, deep breath out, kind of pushes back a little bit and says, Steve, honey, bless your heart. Now, when you throw the honey in front of bless your heart, that just kind of raises it up just a little bit. And they said, that's not what I expected.
Mm.
But here's the amazing thing. Not what I need, not what I want, but how about we roll up our sleeves and let's figure this out together
Mm.
in front of all these folks. I remember that to this day because that person could have just fired. You can finish that phrase there right on the spot and said, thank you very much. There's the door. But they saw something and they said, okay, not what I want, not what I need. Let's roll up our sleeves. Let's do this together. And that's what we did for the next 3 hours is we took the plan, we dismantled it. It was a very tough meeting, but we could tell we were working together to come up with something. Oh, that didn't work for my company. Oh, that didn't work for my company. And this was the first time in my entire career. This wasn't a group of C-levels. This is a group of really intelligent people who were here to solve a problem.
Mm. Mm. That's amazing. That's amazing. So through her leadership, not only did she partner with you and lifted you up, she extended that as a multiplier and gave you partners across the entire board to help amplify what you had. And
Yeah.
I could only imagine your plan by the time you're done with those 3 hours.
Oh,
Who's
it's amazing. Yeah.
who's
Yeah.
going to judge that plan? I mean, you've got so much horsepower behind it now.
Yeah, and we had our plan. And my plan was like a 9-month plan to turn the company around. And this person who hired me, they were just like, you don't have 9 months. You have 3. I'm like, oh, I was missing that bit of information.
Yeah.
And so again, incremental approach for us to kind of move some things forward in a 3-month time frame, again, using the multiplier of everybody in the room. And that again was such a monumental influence in my entire career. Leadership, how to solve a problem, how to work together. Titles didn't mean anything. We were here to solve a problem.
Oh, that's a great example of a player of the week, or in your case, an MVP who saved your career and amplified it in many ways. And for you to share the story that goes year after year, you're able to really spread this this experience and demonstrate an example of what true leadership can be. And yeah, definitely helps me. It inspires me to do better with my job. So thank you, Dr. C, for that. We hope today's conversation has inspired you to rethink how your organization approaches transformation and leadership. If you're interested in taking the next step in business transformation, feel free to reach out to us. You can find us at www.hyperdriveagile.com, and we invite you to keep following us on social media. Now, thank you for joining us today on Goals and Game Changers. My name is Stacey Louie. I'm the CEO of Hyperdrive and your host. Now, stay curious, stay customer focused, and we'll see you next time.